All right, so the next speaker is Sharma. Has already been mentioned and introduced. Gosh, I've forgotten how long Vigesh has been working with us overall between different projects, but at least Panorama has been 6 years. Prior to that, she's been working with Mike Ripple there and other projects that are associated with our lab and the group on proteomics projects. She's been working on proteomics projects since she was a graduate student actually at UCSD. She worked at a company called ActiveX, and I was actually just down there recently getting a seminar, and they were showing me actually a database that she had developed when she was there that they're still using today. So a lot of these things so she definitely has a lot of experience in dealing with proteomics data and mass spectrometry data, and she's been kind of driving at least a lot of the I would say domain expertise. I would say for kind of bridging between our lab and LabKey, and been a key driver in the Panorama development, and also kind of course Panorama Web, which is what most people tend to see when they use it. At least that's our initial first impression of it. So.
Thanks, Mike. So yeah, it seems like it's been forever that I've been working with this lab, but definitely I've been a member of the Skyline Panorama team since 2012. Okay, so as Josh mentioned, if you want to use Panorama, you have a couple of options. You can either install and set up your own LabKey server, or you can get an account and a project on Panorama Web, which is the server that we maintain here at the University of Washington. And since it went live in 2013, we've had project requests from labs all over the world on this server. And when we create a project for you on this server, we make you the administrator of the project. So you have full control over how you organize data within the project. You get to create accounts for other users in your lab or external collaborators. And then you also get to configure the permissions. So you decide who gets read-only access where, and who gets to have administrative control. And even though these projects are free, these are not sort of watered down versions of Panorama. You get the whole feature set of Panorama within your projects. All right, so for this course, I've created a project on Panorama Web, and I've also created accounts for all of you. So you must have received an email that has a link that you need to click on to finish the registration process, set up your password. And I think about 50% of you have done that already. Those of you that haven't, please go ahead and do that now, because we will be working through a tutorial on Panorama Web. The data for this tutorial is, so you will find a Panorama folder. Let's see. So in the drive that you mapped yesterday, hopefully it's still there, and there you will see this Panorama folder. So go ahead and copy this over to, I guess, wherever you're copying it, maybe the documents folder. Is that where you're copying all your tutorial data? So I'm just going to make a copy of this here. All right, so the tutorial itself has two parts. We'll be covering some basic usage of Panorama, and then we'll be mostly going over the experimental data folders. And the second part of the tutorial, we'll be going over the steps for submitting data to Panorama Public, which is our repository for Skyline documents associated with publications. Okay, so does everybody have an account? Does anybody need help? If you don't see the email, maybe check your spam folder. But it looks like everybody is all set. But if you aren't, please raise your hand and Josh or I will come help you. Okay, all right, so I'm going to go to my web browser and go to panoramaweb.org. Okay, so right now I'm not signed in, and I just wanted to point out a few things on the Panorama Web homepage, some resources that are going to be useful for you. So over here in this dark blue box, there's a link to sign up for a new project on Panorama Web. So if you click on this, you will see a form where you enter your name, email address, and the institute or the company that you work at. And when you press submit, the Nat Brace will get an email, and he'll he'll get back to you and set you up with the project and make you the administrator of the project. All right, so back to the homepage, there's also this link that gives you some more information about the Panorama Partners Program. But Josh is here, so please talk to him about this program if you're interested. And definitely the Panorama Partners Program has been a big driver into all the new cool features that have gone into Panorama Web in the Panorama in the last few years. And then down here, just under these images, there's a link for Panorama Public. You can click on it and view all the data that's currently available publicly. Right now, we have 85 data sets that are available publicly. You can browse them, look at the Skyline documents uploaded, but we'll come back to this later in the second half when we are going over the Panorama Public part of the tutorial. Okay, and then to the right, under this box titled Pages, there are several useful resources which will help you get started with using Panorama. So if you expand the documentation node, you'll see links for several pages that give you step-by-step instructions for some of the more common tasks that you will need to do on Panorama. So for example, creating a folder in Panorama. So everything in Panorama is organized in a hierarchical folder structure, and projects are at the very top level of that hierarchy. So when you have a project, typically you'll be creating subfolders under that project to upload your Skyline documents. So this page will give you the step-by-step instructions along with screenshots on how you can do that. And then we also have 3 tutorials. The first tutorial covers, it's sort of like a deep dive into the experimental data folders. The second one covers chromatogram libraries, and this is not something that we'll be talking a whole lot about today. And then finally, there's also a tutorial for submitting your data to Panorama Public. And actually, the process of submitting to Panorama Public itself is it's fairly simple, straightforward, and doesn't require a multi-page tutorial. But the reason we have this tutorial is that it covers several features and collaborative tools that LabKey Server provides. That you can use to add additional information and content that's supplementary information about the publication that you're working on. We have also done several webinars. The first webinar, the introductory webinar, was done in 2013, and quite a lot has changed since then. So we did an updated introduction to Panorama last year in September, and I think this one it's a fairly useful webinar to listen to if you're getting started with Panorama. And then we also have a webinar on using the QC workflow in Panorama, and this was done as part of the Skyline webinar series. So if you've been following that, maybe some of you have already seen that. Okay, and there are links to some example data that Josh briefly mentioned. So we've uploaded some Skyline documents that you can explore to get a feel for what they look like when they've been uploaded to Panorama. And this is available for anyone to look at, whether you have an account on the server or not. And then the final thing I want to point out is this support board. So if you're using Panorama and you run into issues, please feel free to post to the support board. We would love to hear from you. And one thing you may have noticed is that Panorama Web and Skyline website look very similar. They have a very similar look and feel, and that's because the Skyline website also runs within the LabKey server. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and sign in, which all of you have probably already done. But if you haven't, go ahead and do that now. Okay, so for this tutorial, I've created a project for us. So if you see this projects tab in the top right corner, click on that. And this will give you a list of all the projects on Panorama Web where you have at least read access. The project I've created for this tutorial is called the Targeted Proteomics Course project. So go ahead and click on that. Is there anybody who doesn't see that project? Okay. All right, so here I have also have a link to the data that we will be using in this tutorial, but hopefully by now you all have already copied it over from the map network drive. And there's also a PDF of the tutorial, so if you want to refer to anything later on, you can do that. And in the subfolders box, you will see two folders. There should be one folder titled Group Studies, and there will be a second one which has your name on it. Mine is Vagisha, but yours will have your name on it. If anybody doesn't see that folder, then maybe I messed up when I created the folder, so please raise your hand if you don't see it. All right, great. So I did a good job. Okay, so then click on your folder. And on your folder homepage, I've added some useful links that I already showed you on the Panorama web homepage, but this is here for easy reference. And then you will see that in the subfolders box, there's nothing right now. So the first thing we are going to do is create a subfolder for uploading a Skyline document. So to do that, make sure you're scrolled all the way up and then hover over the name of the project right under the Panorama logo. And when you do that, you will see the navigation UI. And as I said, everything in Panorama is organized in a hierarchical folder structure, and the projects are at the very top level of that hierarchy. So, right now I'm in the targeted proteomics course project, and in my own folder. So the folder that you are in currently should be displayed in this bold italicized font. So yeah, you can expand the nodes and see what folders are available under each project. And when you click on a folder name, you will be taken to the homepage of that folder. And right under this navigation UI, you should see a new subfolder link. Is there anybody that doesn't see that? Okay, wonderful. So you see that means that you are all administrators in this project. If you didn't see it, it meant that you did not have admin privileges. So click that icon, new subfolder icon. And then the data that we are going to be uploading to this folder is from System Suitability Studies. So I'm going to name this folder System Suitability. Then under folder type, make sure that you have Panorama selected. The default selection is collaboration. We don't want that. We want to make sure that we select Panorama. And the reason we have to do that is that only in a Panorama type folder are all the Panorama features available. And Skyline will recognize a Panorama type folder as being a valid folder where it can upload Skyline documents. All right, so if you have that selected, then click Next. And on the permissions page, just keep the defaults. We'll change the permissions later. And on the Configure Panorama folder page, you're presented with three options. And Josh talked about the three Panorama folder types. We will keep the experimental data option selected and click Finish. Okay, so you've just created your first folder, and this is what a default Panorama type folder looks like. You have two boxes, and I'm going to refer to these boxes as web parts because that's what LabKey calls them. In the mass spec search web part, you can search for a protein or a peptide across all the documents uploaded in this folder. Right now we have nothing. In the targeted MS runs web part, there will be a row for each Skyline document that you upload to this folder. So let's switch to Skyline. And so under Documents or wherever you've copied that Panorama Tutorials folder, find the Study 9S Site 52 V1 Skyline file. Hopefully everyone has it. If you don't, or if you're having any trouble, otherwise, let me know. So I'm going to open this file. So this file is from a system suitability study that was published in 2013. 11 labs participated in the study, and this particular file is from one of those labs. The data for this study is public and it's available on Panorama Public, and the tutorial PDF on the course on the project homepage has a link to the paper, and it also has a link to where the whole data is on Panorama Public. You can look at that later if you're interested. Okay, so there are a couple of ways in which you can upload a document to Panorama. One is from the File menu. You will see this menu item published to Panorama. You could click on that. Or there is this Publish to Panorama button in the toolbar. So I'm going to click that. And if you've never ever uploaded a Skyline document to a Panorama server, then Skyline will tell you that there are no servers configured that it can talk to. So if you click on this register button, it will take you to that form I showed you earlier where you can request a new project on Panorama Web. But since we already have a project and we have accounts, let's go ahead and click continue. So in the URL field, we already see that panoramaweb.org is entered as a URL. Type your email and password. And click OK. All right, so so I'm seeing the targeted proteomics course, my folder, and the system suitability folder that I just selected, I just made. It's possible that for you, this is, this whole tree is not expanded. So go ahead and expand it if you need to. And then select the system suitability folder or whatever you called your folder and click OK. So now what Skyline is doing is it's making an archive of all the files that are required for this document. So that would be your .sky file, your .skid file, and if there are any bibliospec spectrum libraries that you had with the document, all of them get included in a zip file, and that file is uploaded to Panorama where it's parsed and loaded it into the database. So my document has finished uploading, and Skyline very helpfully tells me, would you like to see the file in Panorama? So, okay, I'm going to click yes. And this now takes me to what I call the document details page, where there's a document summary where you see how many proteins, peptides, precursors, and transitions were measured in this document. It also tells you which version of Skyline was used to upload this particular file. And then below that, you can see a list of all the proteins and peptides that were included in this document. So the reason I chose this file for uploading is that it's fairly small and uploads quickly, but this is not really the data that I wanted to show you. So let's go to the group studies folder that I pointed to you earlier. So again, hover over the name of the project just below the Panorama logo to see the navigation menu. And from there, find the group studies folder under the targeted proteomics course. And raise your hand if you don't see the group studies folder. So I'm going to click that and go to the home page of the group studies folder. So there's a single file here, and it contains data from a heart failure study in a rat model. And I don't think you've seen this file, this data yet. Have you seen any? Okay, so you'll probably see this tomorrow. So this file contains data from 7 diseased and 7 healthy subjects with 3 technical replicates for each. So click on the name of the file, and you will be taken to the document details page, where in the you have the document summary. And below that, in the precursor list table, you have all the proteins, and under each protein, there's a nested table that shows you what peptides are measured for that protein. And you can click on a peptide or a protein to get more details. So I'm going to click on the second protein in this table, which is NP037030. So when I click on this protein, I'm taken to the protein details page where I can see the sequence of this protein, and highlighted in these bluish lavender boxes are the peptides that were measured in this document. Below the protein sequence are some annotations that are available for this protein, the Swissport annotation database, and most of these are hyperlinked. So you can click on, for example, one of the gene ontology terms to get more details about that term, if it will load. Okay. All right. So below the annotations is a table which lists the peptides that were measured in this protein. So go ahead and click on the second peptide in this table, which is VGQ-PDA. So here on this peptide details page, you can see all the chromatograms for this peptide. So there were 42 replicates, and currently you are seeing chromatograms from the first 10 of those replicates. So this table here has one row per replicate. The first column shows you the total precursor chromatogram, and what follows are the fragment ion chromatograms. So in this case, there's just one. It was not measured in light and heavy forms, but if it had been, then the light and heavy fragment chromatograms would show up side by side. Okay, so scroll down to the end of this chromatograms table, and here you will see some summary charts. And I think you've already seen these summary charts in Skyline. So the one to the left that's titled peak areas is there's one bar in this chart per replicate. So this would be your peak area replicate comparison chart, and the one on the right titled retention times would be your retention times replicate comparison chart from Skyline. And then so have you guys seen annotations in Skyline yet? All right. So in Skyline, you can associate little bits of metadata at each level of your document. So you can add annotations to your replicates, to your proteins, to your peptides, and all the way down to the chromatograms. And in this case, the researcher who created this document has set up annotations at the replicate level. So she has a condition annotation, and all the replicate that are from the healthy subjects have been annotated with a value of healthy, and the other ones have been annotated with a value of diseased. So if I wanted to see in this chart what the average peak areas look like for this peptide in the diseased versus the healthy, then I can group this chart. So from the group by menu, this lists all the annotations that are available at the replicate level. So I'm going to select condition. So group by condition, and then click update. So now I'm left with just two bars in my chart. So this is showing me the average peak areas for this peptide in the diseased subjects, and this one is showing me the average peak area in the healthy subjects. All right, so below the summary charts is, so if you have a spectrum library associated with your document and there's a matching spectrum in that library for a peptide, then you will see this interactive annotated MSMS spectrum. And, you can zoom in and zoom out in this viewer, and you can choose which ions you want to show or hide. And this table is listing all the M over Z values for the various fragment ions. And the colored boxes tell you which ones are actually matching in your system. Okay, so now go all the way back up to the top of the page, and I'm going to go back to the document details page. And you can, of course, do that by clicking the back button in the browser. Yes. So you can export them one by one in Skyline, save them. Yeah. I don't think there's a good way of doing that yet. So you just want the images for all of these, right? We can script it up, and if you're interested, I can help you with that. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay, so to go back to the document details page, you will see just above this peptide sequence, there is the name of the Skyline document. So click on that, and that'll take you back to the document details page. Now, anytime you have a grid such as the precursor list grid that you see here, most of the columns are sortable and filterable. And if you click on a column name, you will see the options for sorting and filtering. So now I'm going to apply a filter on the description column. So click on the description column, and then from the menu, choose filter. So this dialog in the Choose Values tab, it's listing all the descriptions that are available in this document, and you can check the ones that you want to filter to, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to click the Choose Filters tab, and then here under Filter Type, you have various options, but I'm going to keep the default Contains filter type selected. And then what I want is a list of the proteins where the description contains haptoglobin. So I'm going to type haptoglobin. And if I typed it correctly, then okay. So my grid is now filtered to the one protein where the description had haptoglobin in it. All right, so this protein, 2 peptides are measured for this protein. So go ahead and click on the first one, LQT. Okay, so the chromatograms that you're seeing can also be filtered, and you can do that by expanding this display chart settings just above the chromatograms table. And there are 2 ways that you can filter. You can either filter for specific replicates, or you can filter by certain annotation values. So for example, if I just wanted to see the chromatograms from this H162 subject, then I would choose these 3. And this is a multi-select combo box. So if you click on something, it gets selected. If you click it again, it gets deselected. And whatever is selected shows up to the right under this replicate filters. So click Update. And then now your chromatograms table should contain only chromatograms from the replicates that you just filtered. All right, so I'm also going to apply a filter on annotations. So first, I'm going to clear the current filter. So there's a clear link, which of course is too tiny for you to see here, but hopefully you're seeing it in your browsers. So click the clear link next to the replicates combo box to clear all the filters. And then from annotations, so this is listing all the annotations as key value pairs. So the name of the annotation, colon, followed by the value of the annotation. So I want to filter all the replicates where healthy was assigned to the condition annotation. So condition colon healthy is what I'm going to select from this combo box, and then click Update. The what, sorry?
The font size on
the file size?
Font size.
Font size. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
That better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So so I just applied my filter, and now I'm seeing chromatograms for 21 of the healthy replicates, and these look pretty good. Okay, so if I scroll down to the summary charts, you will notice that half of the replicates don't seem to have any signal for this peptide. So let me group this by condition again and see what it looks like. So group by condition and click Update. So clearly that this peptide is not expressed very well in the disease subject. So let's see if there are other peptides in this protein that show similar difference in expression. So to go back to the protein details page, scroll all the way up. And in this peptide summary web part, you will see the name of the protein next to the very unhelpful group label. We should really call it protein. But yeah, click the name of the protein to go to the protein details page. And here in the summary charts, right now you're seeing, there are two bars, one for each peptide. So I want to separate this out by the condition. So I'm going to group this by condition and click update. So now I see the first two bars in this chart are from the LQT peptide, disease versus healthy, and the next two are from the SVV peptide, disease versus healthy. So clearly there's a difference in abundance for the peptides measured for this protein. So perhaps this protein could be something interesting for you to follow up on. Okay. So as you can see, there's a lot of information you can get about a Skyline document right within the web browser without having to download the file. So not in the default plots, but if you so LabKey server does provide a host of built-in chart types, and it does expose the underlying database. So you could go to that database and then select the data that you want to plot and choose one of the default built-in plots. So it is possible to do that. Just depends on what exactly that you want to do. It may or may not involve writing a custom SQL query. Yeah, but it's possible to do that. You can build additional plots, in addition to the ones that are already available here. Right. So there's quite a bit of information. So if you're sharing this document with somebody that doesn't have Skyline, although it's hard to imagine why that would be, but they can get a lot of information just by looking at the file within the web browser. And you see several views that a Skyline user is already familiar with, the chromatograms and the summary charts, etc. But you can also download the original Skyline file, and there are a couple of locations where you can download it from. So one is from the document details page. In the document summary, next to the name of the document, there is this download file icon. You can click that and download the file and open it up in Skyline. Another place where you can see it is on the home page of the folder. So right now I'm not on the home page of my folder. I'm looking at the document details page, and you will notice next to the name of the file, there's this little folder icon with the name of the folder. And anytime you see this, you can click on this and go to the home page of the folder. So I'm going to the home page of the folder. And there, in the targeted MS runs table, next to there's a download column. So you can click on that and download this file. And Skyline recognizes these sky.zip files. So when you click File Open in Skyline, if it sees a sky.zip file in the folder, it'll automatically show it to you as as a valid file that it can open. All right, so next we will look at changing permissions on our folders, but before that, are there any questions? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the home page of the targeted proteomics course. And then right now, I'm only seeing two folders here. One is a group studies folder, which is open to everybody, and then there's my folder. So if I wanted to make, let other people see data in my folder, then I will have to change permissions on my folder because, each one of us is the administrator of our folder, and only we have read access to our folders. So click your folder. Mine is Vagisha. And then in this top right, you will see this gear icon. Click the gear icon, and there, from the drop-down menu, select Folder, and then Permissions. All right, so does everybody see this? Is everybody on this page? Okay. So you can assign different kinds of permissions, read-only, write admin permissions, to a user, a group of users within Panorama. So what I want to do here is I want to give read-only access to all the participants, all the course participants. So to do that, I would have to add them to this reader role. So I could type, email addresses, and this list will get filtered down to whatever matches. So I could give Mike read-only access to this folder, but I've also created a permissions group, and it's called course participants, and everybody is a member of that group. So select course participants. Before I save this, I also want to point out that there's a special group here called the site guests. So if you want to make a folder completely public so that anybody who has a link to that folder will just be able to view that folder without having to log in, then you can assign site guests to the reader role. But I'm not going to do that now. Okay, so course participants selected from the reader role, and then save and finish. Okay, so hopefully some of you have also succeeded in changing the permissions. So let me go back to the targeted proteomics course page. So this UI can be a little slow to load sometime. It's very slow right now. Is anybody able to navigate back to the project homepage? Okay, so I'm the only slow coach here. Okay, so great. Looks like a whole bunch of you, pretty much everyone, managed to change the permissions on their folder. So this is kind of nice. You can assign permissions to one user, a group of users, and you can give them read-only permissions, or you can give them permissions to upload or delete documents in a folder, or you can even make them the administrator of the folder. So they would have the ability to create subfolders, or change permissions like you are able to do. Okay, so this is sort of the end of the first part of the tutorial. Does anybody have questions before I move on to Panorama Public? And I don't have a whole lot of time for that. All right, so no questions. So next up is Panorama Public. And I just have a few slides to give some background about Panorama Public. Okay, how do I get rid of this? Okay. All right. So as you've just seen, it's pretty easy to change permissions in folders if you're the administrator of the folders. And this flexibility allowed several of the early users of Panorama Web to put published data within their folders, within their projects in Panorama Web. So they would put a link to that folder in their paper. And once their paper got accepted for publication, they would remove login restrictions from that folder. So anybody reading the paper would just click on that link and be able to view the data in Panorama Web. So this worked out great, but it had a couple of issues. One was that the published data was spread out across these various user projects, and we had no way of providing users the ability to search across this published data. And very often we didn't even know that somebody had put supplementary data up in their own projects. And then the second problem was from the point of view of the journals. Because the data still remained under the control of the authors. So, you can imagine that you could accidentally alter or delete something post-publication. So they didn't want that to happen. So to address these limitations, we created a repository on Panorama Public, on Panorama Web that we call Panorama Public. And even though it has the name public in it, it doesn't mean that any data that you put in this repository has to be public right from the beginning. In fact, the vast majority of the submissions that we get are for papers that are currently under review. So for that, we keep those folders private, and we provide the users a reviewer account that they can pass on to the journals. And then when they tell us that the paper has been accepted, and at that point we make everything public. And then the authors or the submitters have read-only access in these when their data is on Panorama Public. So you cannot accidentally change anything. So yes, if you are doing research with Skyline, please put your data on Panorama Public. And another plug for Panorama Public is that last year MCP came out with some guidelines for targeted mass spectrometry quantitative experiments. And they now require that you provide all the chromatograms used in quantification of analytes along with the peak integration boundaries. So, and it's easy to see that you can satisfy that requirement if you're using Skyline and Panorama. Okay, so here's what the workflow of submitting data to Panorama Public looks like. So the first is that the researcher uploads Skyline documents to their own folder in their own projects on Panorama Web, and we've all already done that. The second step is that they provide some additional information about their data, so things like which organism they studied, which instruments were used for collecting the data. And then when you've added this information, you will see this red submit button. And when you click on the submit button, you'll be presented with a form where basically the most important thing that you'll be doing is creating a shortened URL for your data. So, the initial part of this URL, https panoramaweb.org, stays constant. And what comes after that, that's, I don't know if you can see, it's just highlighted in this yellow box, is what you choose. So, you can choose something that's easy for you to remember or, somehow descriptive of your data. The only restriction is that it has to be unique in the repository. So if anybody else has used this string, then you will be asked to choose something else. And then after you've clicked submit, then that triggers an email to me and Nat, and one of us will make a copy of your data to Panorama Public. So the whole folder gets copied to Panorama Public. So your folder on Panorama Public will look exactly like the one that you have within your own project, and it's going to be read-only. And the permanent access link that you created in step 3, before we make a copy of your folder to Panorama Public, if you click on that link, it will take you to your own folder in your own project. But once we've made a copy, it's going to link to the copy on Panorama Public. Okay. All right, so just to recap, here are the steps for submitting to Panorama Public. You first upload your Skyline documents to your own into your own project. Then you add some additional metadata about your experiment. Oops. And then submit it to Panorama Public, at which point we take over and we make a copy of your data. So recently, we've had to make some small changes to this workflow because Panorama Public became a member of the Proteome Exchange Consortium last month. So is everybody familiar with Proteome Exchange? You've submitted data to Pride, Massive, PASL. Okay, so most of you are probably familiar with it. So Proteome Exchange has basically standardized the way you submit data to one of these member repositories, and they have guidelines specifying what data and what metadata should be included with each submission. So now that we are supporting, and once you submit to one of these Proteome Exchange entry points, then you get a Proteome Exchange ID, which I guess everybody loves. And then, once the paper associated with that data is published, publicly available, at that point, these member repositories announce that data to Proteome Exchange, and they then broadcast it over RSS and Twitter, so researchers can stay up to date with newly available data. So now that we are members of Proteome Exchange, it means any submission has to conform to the requirements of Proteome Exchange. And that means some additional work on your part. And mainly the biggest change is that you have to upload raw data that, the important to your Skyline documents that has to be included. And there's some additional bits of metadata that you have to provide. And then on our part, when you make a submission to Panorama Public, we will go and get a Proteome Exchange ID for you. And then when you tell us that your paper is being accepted for publication, at that point, we will announce your data to Proteome Exchange. Yes. It is. Yes. So now there's a place for you to upload raw data. Yes. For Panorama Public? Forever?
So, we've been doing a bunch of work to be able to support expanded storage, and at the moment, with the current rate, we expect that we'll be able to continue to host it for free as is. If there are groups that are uploading a lot of data, we've got some facilities that we're working out right now to essentially allow data to be stored on Amazon S3. For those who are familiar with that, this is a place to store very big files. And we may at some point reach out to groups to kind of ask them to kick in to help fund that if they're using kind of a disproportionate amount. But at the moment, we're kind of optimistic that the vast majority of users should be covered for
a few years, forever. All right. So I'm actually running out of time. So what I'm going to do is first just show you one of the data sets on Panorama Public. And then just very quickly go through this publication, this data submission workflow. So on Panorama Public, you're welcome to browse the available experiments. I'm going to show you one particular one. So here, this authors or the submitters have provided information about their data, which organism they studied, the instrument, and the description of the experiment. And here in the targeted MS runs, you're able to see the Skyline document that they uploaded, and you can click on that and view the list of proteins and peptides, and examine the chromatograms. And these look very pretty. Also, you are able to download the files from this download link and open it up in Skyline and look at it there. And then in addition, they've also made good use of the tools that are available in LabKey server, so to provide some additional context around their data. So for example, they've included this figure describing their experiment design, and they've also included another one of the key figures from their papers. So are you looking at this? Okay. And if you scroll down, do you not see the? Okay, sorry. Okay, so this additional bit of information is not required for submitting to Panorama Public, but it gives a nice little presentation for anybody coming to Panorama Public and looking at your data. So you can do that if you want to. Okay, so now I'm going to quickly do a demo of how to submit data to Panorama Public. So I'm going to go to the to my folder. Oh, and I think I logged in as no. I'm going to be lazy and not use the folder navigation UI and just go there the lazy way. Targeted proteomics. All right, so now I need to add some additional web parts to this folder to make it ready for submission to Panorama Public. And since I'm the administrator of the folder, I can do that. But first, I need to enter the page admin mode. So from the gear icon, the admin settings, I'm going to select page admin mode. And once I do that, I will, you will see that every web part has this little triangle in the top right that you can click and it'll let you move those web parts up or down. So, and you can even remove them from the page. So I'm going to remove this mass spec search web part from the page. And then I need to add the targeted MS experiment web part. So to add that, there's a menu at the bottom that appears if you're in the page admin mode. So I've selected the targeted MS experiment web part, and I'm going to click add. And now this is telling me that right now there is no experiment in this folder. So I click on this link to create a new experiment. Enter a title. So these are autocomplete fields. So when you start typing something, you will see a drop-down list of what matches, and you have to select from one of those. And this is, I think, the 4000 Q trap that was used for this. Okay, and I'm just gonna say, so feel free to follow along if you want to. I'm just going a little bit fast because there's not that much time. And there are some additional fields here that are now required for a proteomics chain submission. One of them is keywords, and then we need information about a lab head and a submitter. And the submitter by default is selected to whoever is filling out this form and currently logged in. I am going to fill out a submitter affiliation. And then click submit. So this takes me to the experiment details page. And just one thing I want to note here is that the customization that we were doing on the folder homepage, where we were moving web parts up or down and adding new web parts, that's only possible on the folder homepage. So right now on the experiment details page, and you will notice that none of the web parts, have that little control item that I can use to access the menu. And the other thing that tells me that I'm not in the folder homepage is that next to the title of the page, there's this little folder icon and the name of and a link to the folder homepage. Okay, so I can review my experiment here, and then I'm going to click. Wait, let me see what my folder homepage looks like first. So I'm going to go navigate to the folder homepage. And I think what I want to do is move this targeted MS experiment box all the way up. And I might even add a wiki page here. I won't put much work in it, but just to show you how to add a wiki page. So wiki pages are great. They let you add any kind of arbitrary content to your folder homepage. You can even attach things like Word files, Excel spreadsheets, and whatnot. So I'm going to select wiki and then click add. And right now there is nothing. There are no wiki pages. So I'm going to create a new wiki page and let's call it. You can also attach images here, which is what those that example that I showed you they had done. So save and close. And then now So here's what my folder looks like. I have the targeted MS experiment web part. I have the table with the Skyline documents, and then I have a wiki page. So I think I'm now ready to submit this to Panorama Public. So I'm going to click the submit button. Okay, so what happened here? So now that we have to check that each submission conforms to Proteome Exchange requirements, if you have any missing information, there will be a page which shows you what's missing and where to fix it. So for example, I did not enter any keywords, and those are required, and my abstract was way too short, so I need to enter some more information there. And then I also did not upload any raw data. So this step is going to look into each of the Skyline documents and figure out the names of the raw files that you imported, and anything that hasn't been uploaded, it'll prompt you to go and upload it. So the first thing I think I will fix here is upload the raw data. So click upload raw data, and this takes you to a files browser where you can upload files by either clicking on this upload files button and then browsing to the files that you want to upload, but you can also drag and drop. So let's see, documents, Panorama, and these are the files that I need. So your tutorial data contains the web files that you need for this Skyline document. Okay, so now I have uploaded my raw data. So I'm going to go back to the home page of the system suitability folder and click submit again. And now I still have to fill out the missing experiment metadata. So clicking on this update experiment metadata takes me back to that form. Okay, so I need to fix the abstract, and what I'm going to do is there's an abstract.txt file in the Panorama tutorial folder. So I'm going to just copy and paste. And then enter keywords. Click update, and then I'm going to try submitting again. Okay, so now it looks like I had everything. Make sure submit to is selected to Panorama Public, and then I can enter a URL. By default, there's some alphanumeric string that's entered, and you can choose to stick with that if you want to. I'm going to change this to SSP. All right, and then I did not enter a lab head in my in the form earlier, so I can enter the name of the lab head here. So for example, if your lab head doesn't have an account on the server, then you can just enter their name here. Okay. And hopefully everything is right, and click submit. And on the next page, I'm just going to verify that everything looks right. Here is my access link, and looks like it was accepted on the server. And it also tells me that my data will be kept private and a reviewer account will be provided to me. And then this is the user information that will be submitted to Proteome Exchange when we announce the data. So the name of the submitter and the name of the lab head. So at this point, if you are not happy with this, you can cancel out and change things. But I think everything looks okay. So I'm going to click the OK button and then go back to the experiment details. And now you see this copy pending message here. And what this is telling you is that your data hasn't been copied yet. It can take up to a week for the data to get copied. And then you just have to be careful to not make any changes that you don't want to be reflected in the copy on Panorama Public, because whatever your folder looks like at the time we make a copy is what it's going to look like on Panorama Public. All right, then you also see this new submission web part here, and this is just saying that I submitted this data to Panorama Public on such and such date, and this is the access link. Right now, if I click on it, it's just going to go to this to my own folder. Right now, there's nothing in the copied column, and once the data gets copied, then it will show a date as to when that data was copied. All right, so that's it. Sorry for going over, Lindsay. And then just one more thing, these folders that I've created for you will be around for the next couple of months, so feel free to play around. But they will go away eventually. So if you are interested, do get a project on Panorama Web.